Welcome, everyone. Sagdrina, we're so glad you're here.
Thank
Let's get
you.
started.
All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today, this afternoon for you guys, evening for me. We're going to talk about building trust and therefore growing sales and just that cross-cultural skills that support success for vendors. Okay, so farmers markets, as I know that you guys know, are very, very busy places, especially in many of the communities there in Oregon. And they're typically full of movement and conversation, connection. They're places where people show up very differently, in terms of their backgrounds, languages, and even their expectations when they're coming to a market. And so for today's session, we're going to focus on how the way we communicate, sometimes even without realizing it, shapes whether or not shoppers feel comfortable, respected, and confident buying from us. This isn't about being perfect or saying the right things. It is about noticing, adjusting, and staying curious. We don't all communicate in exactly the same way, and that's not a problem, but we need to make sure that we don't pretend that we all do communicate the same way. That's where problems have a tendency to come in. Cultural influences how people ask questions, how direct they are, how comfortable they feel speaking up, and how they make buying decisions. At markets, this can sometimes show up as someone just lingering in a booth quietly, avoiding eye contact, or hesitating before buying. That does not mean that they're uninterested. Often it means that they're still deciding whether or not it's safe enough for them to engage. So shoppers actually are making decisions long before they make a purchase, before any money exchanges hands. They're considering, do I belong here? Can I ask a question without feeling silly? Does this person feel approachable? Those decisions and the answers to those questions happen very, very quickly. And once someone decides that they don't feel comfortable, they rarely announce it. They'll just simply walk away. Understanding the sequence helps us see how small shifts can change outcomes. So the research tells us what and reinforces what I'm sure we all know, and that is that emotional comfort and trust ranks very high in driving purchase decisions, often even higher than product knowledge. And so, and that I think, even though we know it and we feel it, especially at a place like a farmer's market, it's sometimes the case that people don't put the same effort into engaging shoppers as they do in making sure that they can talk about the product if the shopper engages them. Second is, of course, economic comfort and trust ranks high in driving purchase decisions. So often, even like I said, higher than product knowledge. The 75% of shoppers are also very motivated by supporting the local economy. So that means they're already leaning into you, especially people who are shopping at the farmers market. So you are already there. They already feel comfortable and in this decision because they've made the decision to wake up and come to the market. And then product transparency, we have 58% of shoppers that strongly value this. And that's where storytelling and clear communication really matter. The research confirms what many of you already sense. People buy where they feel comfortable. They return when they feel respected. So, yes, product matters, but emotional comfort and trust consistently ranks at the top of purchase drivers. And when shoppers care about supporting local, which most of them do, the question then becomes, does the experience match their intention? So when it does, sales will naturally grow. So, culture really shapes so much of how we move through the world, how close we may stand to one another, whether or not we make eye contact, whether we negotiate, how quickly we ask questions. Something that feels friendly to one person might feel extremely overwhelming to another. Something that feels quiet and respectful to one person might read as disinterest to someone else. When those styles do align, shoppers sometimes leave, not because they don't want your product, but because the interaction just fell off. And that is really important to notice as well. Okay, so let's think about your actual market. Who's there? What languages do you hear? What moments feel awkward or tense? Where do you see people hesitate? These aren't problems, they're information. Patterns tell us where small adjustments could make a big difference. So, if you are able to come off mute, I would love for you to join into the discussion at this point. And maybe, we have the discussion point here, but maybe consider to share challenges with time that surface that you share challenges with your fellow market vendor. Identifying these patterns is the first step towards creating more inclusive sales supporting interactions.
Well, I'll come off mute a little bit and join in the conversation. I have noticed certainly the language differences, like someone who doesn't speak English, which feels like a little more obvious, but one that we have maybe more recently discussed is folks with um, maybe vision impairment. So
Mm.
really experiencing I'm not a vendor, and I don't play one on TV, but in the information booth, really experience the space in a really very different way, and just sort of recognizing that it's something that we can't really even imagine ourselves. We have to sort of learn and grow and adjust so that information can be more available and accessible for folks at the info booth, which has been a challenge and a work in progress, I will say.
Yeah. So, what patterns do you think emerge in these challenging moments? And anyone else can, certainly answer either building on what Amber said, or if you have another example that you'd like to share.
I have one to add on Amber's. Um, as a shopper, yesterday I went to Shemansky and I interacted with the fruit vendor, and we were talking about the taste of peach and plums and all that. And I learned that the sour, the taste expression of sourness is something related, something negative when you express sour. I said sweet and sour, and then the vendor said, "Oh, we don't really want to explain the taste of the peach. We don't want to relate the sourness of the peach taste because I don't know, it's negative in English."
Mm.
um, and then he said he likes to express it with tanginess of peach. So okay, and then he kindly explained that to taste what sourness is of actually a plum, different sourness, right? I do have I have Korean background, and we have different taste notes, obviously, in Korean language. But
Okay.
just peach. I didn't know the peach has negative
Mhm.
connection with the taste, sour. So I learned, but
Yes.
yeah, that's one story that I experienced yesterday.
So it's as much about, that in addition to language, right? It's in terms of just like the actual, maybe different languages spoken between us. In
Yeah,
addition to that, it's also the perception or even how what a word means,
right,
in one language versus another language, right? Even if you are clear on what you're saying, it's what does it mean, and what feeling does it evoke?
right.
And
I felt like, oh, I didn't know that the sourness of peach is related to remind you of something negative. So
mhm.
to say sour um, in Korea, which is not a bad thing.
The opposite is true for
Yeah,
salty Korea.
sometimes, yeah. Sourness of peach with like sweetness, well,
Oh, I see.
complex taste is actually
Mhm.
a good thing.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So, okay, I learned something else, and then I had that interaction. That was interesting.
Yeah.
And then, kind of in a way, like he tried to tell me that the sourness actually is something else, like a plum skin. Uh,
Yes, 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 yes.
The taste is cultural.
so, but the taste, yeah, the taste is actually culturally constructed. So,
Yes, yes, the taste itself.
yeah,
So you said you were a shopper in that experience?
yeah.
And so were you describing this to the vendor or
Yeah.
were you in the process of purchasing that item from the vendor?
So they were having the tasting.
Mhm.
I could sample. So
Okay.
and then he tried to like make people to sample it and taste the freestone peach. So I also learned another thing. The name of the freestone peach is because the pit comes off very easily. So that was
Mhm.
information. I didn't know that before. And I tasted and then uh, said, "Oh, this is nice. This is sweet and sour."
Yes, 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 yes.
Started.
Yes. Okay. Understood. Well, so that was interesting. I mean, I'm curious, do you, because you're also a vendor, correct?
I'm not a vendor.
Okay. Okay. Um, so what is your relationship with farmers markets?
So I'm I'm a researcher. My anthropological research during
Okay.
COVID at the Portland Farmers Market, mainly PSU, and that's how I have relationship with Portland Farmers Market.
Understood. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious if you were actually a vendor, what your like what that might transfer in terms of the knowledge for you. I'm curious, some of the other folks, if you are able to join in the conversation, if you're a vendor or a market leader, um, and maybe you can kind of share how that story may have you may have experienced that as a vendor. It'd be very interesting to see kind of your thoughts on this particular example.
Yeah.
Is it Aaron or Anne Marie? I
I'm
think earlier.
Amy.
Oh, there you. Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi there. We have experienced a little bit of like I can relate with what she was saying a little bit because we with our blueberries, there are definitely some sour tasting blueberries. Um, Generally we use the word tart
Hmm.
when we're talking um to our customers. Tart or tangy, like she
Hmm.
mentioned. Um, but yeah.
Yeah. Very interesting. And now you have some additional information that, may be of interest as you're, talking to
Yeah,
people that are different cultures that just
that's right.
even the way you describe that exact experience with having, a piece of fruit can influence, how they think the experience will be, whether it's a taste, it's a tasting or not. But I also do think that tastings are so valuable for this reason also. You know what I mean? So being able to allow people to have their own experience with it based on their understandings, also provides a vendor an opportunity, to make a connection, to create
Mhm.
conversation, and also maybe and evoke that kind of understanding and response that happened with that particular example. So I don't know what the percentages are of markets or vendors that offer sampling. I don't think it's extremely high, but I do know that the research is overwhelming on how much offering samples to customers increases sales. So it's just, I think it's a best practice in general, but definitely something as we're thinking about how we want to make as many opportunities for engagement available, for ourselves and for market shoppers as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about nonverbal communication and first impressions, because the truth is that before we even say a single word, we are communicating. Are our arms crossed or open? Are we turned towards a shopper halfway, or are we facing away? Does our tone sound rushed? Are we hot? Are we stressed? And is that coming across to the people that we're encountering? Sometimes someone doesn't approach because they don't want to interrupt. They feel like they're disturbing. And whether we realize it or not, they're reading our energy. So presence is part of the booth setup. And I think that's a really important consideration. So, does anyone have a story to share about nonverbal communication and how it may have impacted a sale or a conversation? And this can include, you as a shopper or as an actual vendor, or even something that you've observed if you are in leadership.
I can't take an awkward silence, so I'm going to unmute myself again. Something that is important to us is to sort of maintain your front to your shopper base. So if you are going to have a conversation with a person in your booth or a coworker or even another shopper, that you're oriented in a way where you're still sort of open rather than having your back to new folks who might be coming into your booth. And
Mhm.
that just sort of to us, sort of as we've experienced as shoppers, it signals to people approaching the booth that yes, I'm here and I'm prepared to help you in the way that you need to be helped or do my best.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing that I remember about the Portland farmers market is that the setup with the booths also prevents there from being like side interaction. You know what I mean? People really have to kind of walk up directly to the booths, and the booths are so closely, kind of connected to each other. There isn't a lot of space for people to come in between booths. And I think that to your point, when I've seen, a lot of market setups, and sometimes the setup is where the shopper is competing with the attention because there's a lot of different angles that they can engage and that they can try to get the attention of the vendor. So I wonder, even with when we're considering setup, and I know, Amber, that you have a lot of experience in that as well. So I'm just curious, how, from a market leader's perspective, what are you considering when it comes to how that setup impacts the vendor, I mean, the shopper experience, and and a vendor can unknowingly give off, body language that isn't necessarily the intention.
That's a good question. I think for us, it's we do aspire to sort of recognize everybody as they
Mhm.
approach the booth. So this may not be super relevant to vendors, but it might. That when possible, we do something called work in the line. And that's when you've got folks lined up, and this is generally people who are purchasing currency from us. So they're lined up for a specific purpose and they come every week so they know what to do. We'll have someone get out of our booth and walk that whole line, check
Okay.
in with everybody who is standing in line, ensure that they're in the right spot and that they're not just waiting in line to ask where the bathroom is at, or perhaps they're, if you're a vendor, I know some of our vendors will have a line to check out so you can shop their booth freely. And then when you've kind of selected all your purchases, you'll pop into that other line. As a brand new shopper, I would find that really confusing if signage wasn't
Mhm.
clear and the process wasn't really clear. So part of our experience is to make sure that we're recognizing new people and that you can kind of see that they kind of look a little confused. They
Mhm.
sit back a little bit. Their body language is really obvious to me that they're
Sure.
not sure what they're doing there, if they're in the right spot. And I look for those people to sort of bring them in, get them in line and answer their questions even before they've made it to the front of the booth.
Oh, I
And the
see.
the goal is to sort of reassure them that, yep, we're going to be with you in a few minutes. And
Uh-huh.
yes, you are in the right spot.
Yes. So, and it's interesting because even like I'm thinking about similar ways that I've seen vendors welcome customers while they're waiting, and sometimes it is paired with offering a sample. Right. So you have someone that's there, engaging people and offering them a sample, talking to them about product as they're waiting for their turn, to directly make a purchasing choice or to, ask detailed questions, right? But that kind of, to me, actually, I was at the Forsyth Farmers Market in Savannah 2 weeks ago, and they had a grill, one of the meat and sausage vendor, and they do it every time. They have the sausage, and it's not directly next to the booth, but it's close enough where, people kind of congregate separately about that. And then, while they're waiting for the line, so they don't feel like they are actually in line and they're chatting with the guys that were on the grill. So it was a really interesting way for just from I guess maybe a kind of a psychological perspective, like people feel differently around gathering around a grill and waiting versus just standing in line and waiting. So I think it's just it felt more community, like we're all sitting around in barbecue,
Yep.
tasting and eating food, and it's like, oh wait, now it's my turn to buy the sausage, and so it really kind of worked out really well. So just something I think all of these kinds of examples help us to consider that we do kind of subconsciously create welcoming environments, right? It's just adding some additional layers of consideration when it comes to ways that we can provide really positive first impressions, even through nonverbal communications. All right. So, here's another activity that I would like for us to work on, and I'm not sure if this is the one or not, Amanda, um, that you provided them ahead of time. But I'm just going to talk about it a little bit, and then instead of us going into breakout rooms, I think we can just have the conversation here, obviously. But the idea is that we're not trying to critique anything, and in some degree I feel like we've already kind of done this exercise, but the idea is that we are going to observe the interaction and really just pay attention to what's happening, noticing the gap between intention and perception. Oftentimes we do not need a big shift, we just need a very small recalibration, so an adjustment, and then also considering how we actually physically move, a step forward, a smile, a pause, like what are we actually adjusting in terms of our approach, and those moments matter, right? Okay, so with this activity we are going to analyze small market interactions and exploring the difference between your intent and how shoppers may interpret or might perceive your signals. So we're going to consider identifying nonverbal cues that invite interaction. And also, we're going to consider those that might discourage engagement, even if it's unintentional. All right. So let's see. I know, Amanda, is this reflective of what you sent out?
I think so. This is the one with the 4 scenarios.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Just
So
put those instructions and a link to them in the chat if people don't have them.
okay. So what we could do is just go to that. I can pull it up and then we can just have it on the screen, if that makes sense. Or if it makes sense for me to stop sharing, Amanda, if you want to share screen and pull it up and we can work on it together that way. That might be a little bit quicker.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you see the activity?
Can everyone see that? Okay. All right. So how do we want to do this? Do we want to just go through each one of the scenarios? Do we want to take turns and choose a scenario and then we can have a group conversation if like maybe someone can read scenario A and then we can focus on um, the discussion questions there. And then we will work together to redesign that interaction using the questions that are listed. And then, as you can see, we've provided some examples of what that redesign might look like there. So we're not going to need to leave the space and so we won't need to come back in, but it would be great if you can come off mute, if not turn your camera on so we can see you and engage with you. It would be fantastic. Anne Marie, are you able to come off mute and just let us know you're here?
You're doing homework class?
We're gonna talk about these.
Hello?
I think that was Aaron and Amy chatting
Yeah.
Turkey's
Oh,
blueberries.
okay.
And would you like me to read scenario A?
Okay.
Okay. A vendor stands behind the table with arms crossed, answering questions briefly while checking their phone between interactions.
Okay. All right. So, what might the vendor intend? What might be the reasons why that vendor is interacting in this particular way with
Because there's 4 other markets.
what was that?
Oh, I said because there's 4 other markets going and our staff are saying, what's this price? And can we get this order ready?
That's right.
As you say, sorry, I had to answer that one.
I love that. I love that answer because I think that's oftentimes the truth,
Oh,
right?
it's every day.
Yeah, they're balancing multiple things and they may be on the phone with a customer or they may, or someone who's with a customer. So the intention very well and probably largely is that they are trying to balance the needs of a lot of people. Right? So that's very fair. For the shopper that's in this experience, how might that be interpreted for a shopper?
Oh, as though you don't care. It's horrible. Yeah, who wants to do that?
Which is the exact opposite. They care a lot for a lot of things, for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
I see that everyone's off mute, which is great. Is there anything else you want to add? Okay,
Maybe
what?
they are giving someone directions for the market.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely what could
Happens.
be taking place with the vendor for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's interesting how you can use checking your phone when your arms are crossed.
Well, it's possible though.
You have fun. But I see the intention why that, maybe
Yeah.
not interested, or, it can be seen as not interested in the interactions. So,
No, absolutely. And also, after another thing to consider about arms crossed, because I'm like, wait a minute, how do you do this? Well, sometimes if you have your arms crossed like this, you may have your phone here, and you're like
oh,
this, you know. But here's the thing. How many different stances does a vendor take after they have stood on the same two legs for how many hours? You shift, you cross,
yeah,
you do all these things that are also about your own, just your body needing you to do something different. And so you could very well be creating, a blockage to a customer, and you're really just trying to take the pressure off of your lower back, you
right,
know? And that's a very real, I
Yeah.
think, like consideration. Um, we have this new campaign in Georgia called Meet Me at the Market. And one of the things that we
Your
are
mom's calling.
using as our kind of like our three core tenets of the campaign are the areas of focus that Farmers Market Coalition was able to establish from the data that was done from a national survey on shopper behavior. And one of those core tenets is that farmers markets don't just happen. And one of the things that we're trying to focus on with that is to help shoppers and consumers understand that, the smiley, happy faces that you see in the beautiful produce, like there's an entire operation that takes place and that these are real people. It's not, um, even though it is an anchor and community experience and can really be, a great way to spend a Saturday, these aren't actors. These are real people. And so I feel like this is a great session for us to talk about and share ideas on how we can bridge some of these gaps. But I think some of this also is kind of like can happen on a larger scale. How do we engage the community in general on how farmers markets are different spaces than other spaces. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity for those kinds of conversations. All right. Now, um, we kind of, I think, talked about the emotions that the shopper might feel. How could this experience impact the likelihood of purchase?
I can say that it certainly could impact someone's interest, like they don't find the vendors interested in them, and so they move on to a different spot. Um, it could be that the shopper is there for different reasons. Maybe that particular vendor has an item that is very important to them and no one else has
Mhm,
it, or a
mhm,
status such as certified organic in some instances. Sometimes that's what shoppers want above all else.
mhm, mhm,
But I think about these things in that there isn't a difference between a vendor who's distracted and maybe has their arms crossed and going to an anonymous grocery store and purchasing the same thing. So for
Yes.
those vendors who may have products available in both instances, the farmers market is your chance to sort of offer that experience. It's really different from the anonymous experience of ordering online or going to a grocery store.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's true. And I think that, and like I said earlier in the presentation, people who are coming to shop at farmers markets, getting up, coming at a certain time, on a weekend, for the most part, like they're already bought in to the experience, right? So like there is a huge space where they are going to be willing, like we wouldn't be willing to stand in the grocery store line in the same way that we are willing to stand in the line for the organic grower. That is 100% true. Um, and we also, as within the farmers market community and as, independent business people, we need to always consider what are the individual experiences within this collective decision? And how is that individual experience, impacting, or how can it be improved upon in ways that make sense and also increase sales, right? And create community and create repeat sales. So yeah, I think we're definitely understanding this in a way that makes sense. Let's move to step 3. How might we, let's just say in general, what might we do considering these like the changes in our body language, tone adjustments? What can we do that might shift the experience and change the engagement?
Eye contact with the person who's trying to ask a question, even if it's just to let them know, or like what Berkey's was saying, like I'm helping staff at another market, just a second or
That's
something.
right.
Humanize it. Let them know who you are and why you're doing what you're doing. I think that's a really big
Yeah.
benefit of markets.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's a superpower, actually. And, speaking to your own, um, maybe like vulnerabilities, that you're stretched thin, people actually feel more connected when they're like, okay, they have stresses and challenges. And sometimes that's how people will respond, oh, I understand. I own a business, or no problem, signed up for this, they'll give you that engagement and encouragement. So I think that's great. I was thinking like, that it doesn't even have to change. Like nothing has to change. You can still stay on the phone. You're just explaining, what's happening to your customer and building that trust because there it goes back to I'm acknowledging you, I'm building trust. So yeah, I think that's great. All right. Any other comments about this before we move on in the presentation?
I'd like to make one comment that I've just noticed that we're always being watched and not in the creepy way like the bots in the Zoom, but there is sort of this, and I don't mean performative in a bad way, but just the interactions that you have with shoppers, people hear them, whether it's your neighbors or the customer next door or the next one in line. And it's just that opportunity to um, really demonstrate how how great you are and how great your products are. I feel like we have the most talented farmers here producing and non-farmers as well, producing some incredible products. And it's difficult when you see those vendors really struggle at the sales point of it because they've worked so hard to get there and they've done such a great job to do that. And so I just encourage folks to sort of think about who else is sort of watching these interactions and how they might perceive their interaction that they would have. Um, I've had that experience before where you're helping somebody at the information booth and the conversation you're happening is heard by the person behind them who gets up and was like, now, what were you saying about that purple sprouting broccoli? And I'm like, well, let me tell you. And so just sort of like using that as an opportunity to kind of showcase your personality and your products.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I've even had it happen between like booth neighbors. There'll be a conversation that starts and happens at one booth and then it transfers over or the customers. I've even seen customers switch places because they, oh, I heard something here and you heard something here. And then next thing you know, they're both buying from each other, so which I think is also a really special thing about farmers markets is that like it's not like maybe other types of places where you might interact with individual businesses. A farmers market, like it's really like a supportive environment with vendors amongst vendors, and I would say most cases. Okay, all right, let's move on. I'm going to share screen again. Okay. Okay. We good? Yeah. All right. So, and interestingly enough, that was a very perfect segue into storytelling as a tool for connection. So, um, and I think that the thing, and it's funny because, we said things like presenting or performing or, being, sometimes we think about storytelling about being polished or being dramatic. And it's really about sharing something that's real, you know. At the end of the day, it's, what are you able and willing to offer to someone that is comfortable for you to share, but could serve to bridge the gap. So, for example, maybe it's how your grandmother cooked a particular vegetable that you are offering. Maybe it's the story of why you're farming in the first place. And maybe it's, what in this particular variety or this particular harvest, why is it special? What's new or different about it? What is the story of the food? And the thing about stories and the reason why they work is because they really have this way of transcending a lot of other barriers, and people want to humanize you and they want to feel connected to you. And so once you start to share, then the effort's going to be made to address whatever other barriers are taking place. And so it really does help the person that is shopping to understand, the care that is behind the product. And so basically, we want people to understand the story because when they do, then the price makes much more sense. And so, yeah, so I just got back from Mexico. And one of the things that we did as an experience was we went to a mezcal tasting, and it's an artisanal mezcal brand, and they made it very, very clear. They had a whole presentation, so it was educational as well as tasting. But they said several times along the way that we are going to help you understand the care and the effort and the intention and the process and every aspect of this, and even the story, and the pictures of the great great grandfather on the wall with the agave plant. I mean, it's really, really significant. And it did. And at the end of it, I mean, like I was willing to pay just about anything for that bottle of mezcal. Like it's just the truth. It was going on with me. It was happening. And we bought a lot of stuff, not just mezcal, because we just felt like connected to those to that family, to the entire family business, both the folks that were in the restaurant that was doing the actual tasting, but also completely connected to their family in Oaxaca. It was just really, it was pretty incredible. Okay, so we're going to do um, another it's kind of not breakout room, but group activity. And it's called the 30-second market story. All right. And I think we can just talk through it, as a group, as opposed to trying to actually draft a story, because the idea would be we would come back and share that with each other, but we're just going to build it together and talk about it. So um, let's think about a story that we might want to tell, or maybe if there is a vendor. I think we lost one of the folks that had joined us. But if there is a product or a vendor or a market moment that we can kind of story tell around. I gave my example of mezcal, and in this case, it is a plant. It is a food product, so that does qualify. It wasn't at a farmer's market though. So we really want to think of things that can be told in 30 seconds or less. So what might be a short story that one of you has. And then we want to, we can build it really considering using simple and accessible language that anyone can understand. Um, we want to make sure that it is warm. What is your genuine passion and how can that come through? And what makes this relevant to your shopper? And then, how can you make that shopper feel good about their purchase decision? So remember that the stories increase shoppers' confidence and support sales outcomes. Amanda, you've been quiet. What do you got for us?
Yeah, this made me think of, well, my favorite story that a vendor ever told me.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And you'll see why right away, because I went into their booth and I was like, oh, this Sprigarillo, I love this. And they were like, yes, Amanda, you got so excited about it last year. We planted it just for you this year.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if that was true, but they knew exactly what to tell me to get by.
And that is like, that's a craft of the pressure, right? It's like, oh, I'm so glad you're here because we grew it for you.
Yes. That's great. But I bet you buy it from them because they grow it for you.
And I
So
do. I continue to this day looking forward to seeing it. I'm like, oh, that thing I loved.
no, it's listen, my best friend has, I'm from Savannah and she's really my family because most of my family has moved away. So she's my family there. And every time I walk in, she's like, your room is ready for you. And I really believe that it is only my room. Now it's the only guest room in her house. So I know it is not my room. But she does every single time. She remodeled it just this last visit. She was like, did you see the changes we made to your room? And so so I'm like, yes, I love it. And how'd you know by colors? And so so yes, it is the games that we play and the games that we agree to participate in because it makes us feel good. So, all right. All right. So let's kind of dive into internal bias that also kind of connects to missed opportunities. And the truth is that we all have assumptions, and that is very much a part of being human. And sometimes we assume that someone is not going to buy. Sometimes we assume that someone is just looking, and sometimes we make the choice to give more attention to people that feel more familiar to us. The tricky part is that those assumptions actually do cost sales that we don't even know that we lost in the first place. So awareness isn't about shame, it's about widening the welcome, right? So there's no reason, to to kind of go through the ticker tape in your head of like, oh gosh, how many people that look like me that I talked to last weekend? That's not what we're trying to do. We really want to make sure that we're just recognizing our own patterns and what are we, how are we leaning in? Do we get excited when people walk up with dogs and then forget everybody else, that that is around the booth? And that kind of happens. Or do we love babies and get very into a conversation and realize that there may be some other folks that are waiting patiently and in the heat? So what are the patterns that we have that we can shift just through the awareness that we do it? So if we have this way, again, like it's not about performance, but if we do have a story or two that we know that we need to kind of incorporate continuously as we're talking to people and build on, with our customer base, then we are we're creating a rhythm to how we sell and a rhythm to how we engage, which those two are very, very connected. And by doing that, we are interrupting assumptions that we may have, and internal biases that we may not even realize that are coming through. Okay. So I want you to consider these three steps when you notice an assumption. The first thing that when you notice it, so the example is this shopper probably can't afford the premium items. Okay. Whatever reason, let's say the shopper is 12. Okay. And you're like, there's just no way. And they don't even know what this is. Um, but we need to pause still and say to ourselves, what if I'm wrong? Do I actually, um, what do I actually know right now? And what information am I actually missing? What could be a reason, in my example, what could be a reason that a 12-year-old might be at your booth?
Shopping for their parents.
There you go, right?
Or
Mom may have,
that's
mom may have said, hey, I'm busy at this booth over here. You go grab this exact same this thing, yada 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 yada, right? What are some other reasons?
just curious. If I were a 12-year-old, I want to just go wherever vendors I'm interested in and just try
Yeah.
to talk, find out things.
Yes, yes, and we also know that the incredible influence that children have on the purchases of their families. Tremendous, you know? So if you can engage a child in your product, like that's gold. And especially, the types of food that we sell at markets. One of the biggest challenges that grown-ups feel, parents feel in particular, is trying to get children to eat things, to be adventurous with their eating, right? So if a kid is willing to eat it and try it, then there's a pretty good chance that the parents, are going to at least consider purchasing it, right? Um, and then this after you pause and you question yourself, kind of interrogate yourself, um, then you have this opportunity to choose curiosity, you know. Um, Consider things like I'll engage warmly and let them decide, even if they don't purchase, how can that be a bad thing? Right? It does, but it does take intention. You have to really and truly be intentional about this because it's just so easy to disregard, when we've got all these other things going on, competing priorities, to disregard someone because of a bias that we've created. And the truth is that when we are intentional, that does change the tone, and it also um, our body language changes because we become more self-aware in general, and the shoppers are going to feel that shift. All right. All right. So let's think about this as it relates to real situations. So we have language barriers. We want to practice using simple language, gestures, and patience to bridge communication gaps. We want to consider to communicate value and quality without defensiveness or assumptions. So, a very good example of this is when someone says, well, and this I think came up in the last time we had this exact conversation that someone expressed, and maybe it was me even, that they've been in a booth where they're looking at something and someone says something like, oh, that's our most expensive, brand. We do have lesser expensive varieties or something along those lines. And that's a lot of assumptions. And I think it's also very fair that someone's trying to, before you decide not to get the most expensive thing, that you understand that you have other options, right? I think that may be what is trying to be communicated. But for someone who is, again, trying to decide whether or not they're going to engage with you in the first place, that could be exactly the type of response that makes them feel like this is not a safe place to have a further discussion. Okay. And then also when it comes to first time shoppers, We really want to create welcoming experiences that turns a visitor into a regular customer. That may not happen in the first visit. You know, even though people, it takes all the effort in the world to come to a farmer's market, not everybody comes to a farmer's market to shop the first time. They really want to check it out and see, is this a place that I feel good? Is this a place that people are answering my questions? Why am I coming here instead of the grocery store? And before I decide to make that shopper's decision to purchase, I'm going to get a feel, for this experience and make sure it feels good. And that's also, and also tell vendors like that's why some of the other aspects of farmers markets are so important. Because even if somebody doesn't purchase, if they feel like this is a place where they feel good, they're more likely to come. And in most cases, they will eventually purchase, right? And once they purchase, we learn that they purchase more and more and more, and they become more and more comfortable shopping with more and more vendors. So it is a really, really good, just kind of general way to be considerate of first time shoppers, just as much as we are our long term and very, solid kind of core base. And then also, nonverbal misreads. We need to recognize and adjust when nonverbal signals create unintended barriers. Now, this is important because this also does not necessarily have anything to do with language, right? This could be cultural, this could be generational. My daughter, just the other day, I was in Mexico visiting her, and I was talking, and I was talking with my hands, and she literally said, "You're stressing me out with the way that you're speaking with your hands." And we have very different, and I was passionate about something, and I was just, using my hands. But it was a stressful situation, and I'm like just really kind of talking and expressing myself, and she's literally like, I don't know if I can handle solving this problem until you put your hands down, you know? So I think there is even with something that is just a very natural way that we engage, that can be misinterpreted. Now, I am not suggesting that you not be yourself, right? Because any effort that you make to not be yourself is not going to come across authentic, and then you have a different problem. And I did very much remind my daughter that she has known me for 23 years and that I've always spoken with my hands and that it's probably not going to change. So, but it did help us, for me and for her, to understand where the breakdown, kind of was happening in us solving this challenge that we were having. And so then that goes back to like admitting or expressing vulnerabilities, right? And so if one person can do that, or, if you realize that someone's, responding to your passion, kind of going back, you can just simply say, "Oh, you know what? I just get so excited about this." And so that's a shift that you can make where like they still might think your personality is a lot, but then they're like, "Wait a minute, they really know, they're excited about peaches." You know? And who's going to get mad at you for being excited about peaches? All right. So let's turn this insight into something tangible. And we're going to translate kind of what we've talked about into some things that you can use at your booth. So I'd love it if you guys could choose one asset that addresses a communication challenge that you've identified at your market. So we want to consider like what is a barrier that you see regularly, and I want you to translate that like a solution or what you've learned into something that you can use at your booth this week. So you can choose one of the assets that addresses a communication challenge that you've identified at your market. And if you want to just kind of give that some thought, we've got, an example here. You've got like a multilingual signage, visual product guides, vendor phrase sheets. So choose one of the assets that addresses a communication challenge that you had at your market. And when you're ready to share, just come off mute.
I could say I was at the market this past weekend, and the vendor booth had 3 different types of broccoli
Mm.
market, and it was the type of signage where they just had all the prices on one board,
Mm-hmm.
and like I couldn't tell. The 3 different broccolis each had a different price, but I couldn't tell which broccoli
Mm.
was which broccoli. And yeah, if they had had a visual, if they had a picture,
Yes.
that would have helped me know. And then also, or if they had the price actually with the item rather than going to
Yes.
the board to look at it, because there was also some slightly different pricing too based on how it was packaged, and if it wasn't a package, or if you could
Mm.
just pick your own amount and pay for it by pound. And honestly, it was so confusing. I did buy broccoli somewhere else because I
Wow.
and they were busy.
Yes.
I might have asked if they weren't so busy for some help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, I want that in that case, that's on me. I wanted to move faster than like they would have been able to help me. But yeah, the product guide or would have been helpful.
Yeah, for sure. I've also seen, like, speaking of peaches, it's peach season in Georgia. So, but speaking of peaches, that's something that I think peach vendors do really, really well is like they'll have a descriptor. I mean, they sample, but they also have a description of the varieties. And like they'll say, sweet with it, tartness, or, you know, they'll talk about how the varieties vary, or they might say rare this week only. And maybe that explains why that peach is more expensive than the other peaches, or, we only, limited, whatever, limited edition peach. Um, so, how can we help customers understand with our visual signage, you know, the differences in what we're offering? And also like the difference, because also you'll have vendors that have offer products that are similar to another vendor, but there is a distinction in their product that sometimes may not be understood by the shopper. All right. Um, has anyone had any experience using multilingual signage or experiencing multilingual signage?
That was the one I was sort of thinking about. And when we see produce that's really unique in our markets, that is maybe very common in certain cultures, I really like, might have been like bitter melon or something. The
Mm-hmm.
name of it was in the vendor's native language, which
Mm-hmm.
was not a not it. It was, I think it was maybe Lao. Maybe it was Lao. So the characters were even unfamiliar, but they chose to do that. And then in parentheses, they put the common English name and then a little description of what it tasted like.
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked about that was that it gave me a lot of information about this product is going to be really unfamiliar to me in my
Mm-hmm.
kitchen. I knew that because I had not seen it before. It had a name on it that was a different language than what I speak. And then it gave a kind of very short name that maybe is recognizable, but still wasn't. It gave a little bit of like good in soups, I think is what it said, or something like that. So it just gave this like kind of 3 part, the native kind of term for it, maybe the common English term, and then what do you do with it? So it was all in one spot. So if I was feeling adventurous on that day, which I was not, um, I would have been like, "Oh, I'm making soup. Cool, give me that thing," and off I would go. So it was. I thought it was interesting and unique, and it was memorable for me in a really good way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's, and again, even within, um, even within, whether it's the English language, because of so many cultures that indigenous cultures that are here, there things, products that are sold that just have different names, same exact product. And so the thing that comes to mind to me as a product that is growing in popularity here is, I mean, hibiscus, which, is also Jamaica, is also sorrel, right? So, and that can be the plant or it can also be the drink, so the way it really just kind of depends on the cultural context, but the language can be, or the word can be very different within even the same language. So I think that's also where like signage matters because a lot of people don't know that um, sorrel is made from the same hibiscus that we may have, in loose leaf tea. So if you are selling a sorrel based products, you have to explain that if that's what you're calling it, a hibiscus based product. I think the vendor phrase sheet is pretty important because that kind of helps. It's kind of like um, a guide for the common ways that we talk about food and that we talk about produce that we may, because we're so used to speaking about it that way, we may not understand that a shopper, not even necessarily a first time shopper, just isn't familiar with what these phrases mean, Um, they just don't know. And if we don't define it, and sometimes there are fine distinctions between the way we classify food, even, So I think those are the kinds of things that we really, really have to consider when we are creating assets. And instead of having to think about all the things we have to share, we can, if we have a guide that really kind of speaks to it, could be really helpful. All right. So, when communication shifts, outcomes also shift. And that really helps improve that shopper experience, which increases the likelihood that they're going to purchase. And shoppers who feel welcome linger, and the direct impact is also the likelihood of increases the likelihood of a purchase. And I think, and so you think about going back to the sampling, because I just think sampling is just an instant way to create a conversation. Very rarely do I, unless I absolutely do not like what I sample, and I don't think that it's wise to sample things that people don't enjoy. Let me be clear. But, and I mean, that I feel obligated. If I enjoyed something plus a conversation with you, then I'm like, okay, I gotta buy this. I might not have come here to buy this particular sausage that, I don't intend to cook, and I don't have any intention on cooking that anytime soon, but I can stick it in the freezer. I know that because he told me that it will last in the freezer for X number of days or months, right? And then I will be inspired because I have this wonderful recipe or this conversation or this story behind this that I can also pass along. I'm doing mahjong with a group of friends, and I that artisanal mezcal. I sent them a note, and I'm like, "Hey, come and taste this, and let me tell you the story about this family farm in Oaxaca." And everybody's excited. I brought it all the way back for that exact purpose. And so when shoppers feel confident and like and in my case, like now I feel like I know a little thing about mezcal, we also purchase and we also come back. So the actionable insights that participants can apply immediately will both improve the relationships and the revenue. Okay. All right. So as you can see here, research demonstrates that trust, clarity, and storytelling significantly influence purchase decision and market sustainability. Relationship-based selling is not optional, it is foundational, particularly in farmers markets. Returning your shoppers are your sustainability plan. So understand that the more you can get shoppers to return, the more stable the business becomes, the greater opportunity for taking it in the direction you want to, scaling it, increasing the products that you cover, whatever it is that you're seeking to do. And shoppers also, the very important aspect of this is as they feel comfortable, they want to share this experience, so they're going to bring friends. They will advocate for you. They will go and grab other shoppers. I've seen folks, wives go grab their husbands, or friends go grab their friends and come taste this, or I'm not sharing mine, you need to buy your own, come try this out. And so those things happen because very quickly you're building trust. So connection isn't it does make us feel good, but it's not simply a soft approach. It's also a very strategic way, to interact with your customers. All right. So here are some practical takeaways for market leaders. You want to make sure that you're in the mode of auditing your nonverbal communication. So spend a market day just observing how your body language, is impacting your experiences with others. Consider your booth setup, the signals that you're sending, and ask a trusted friend for honest feedback. Like I said, I didn't ask for my daughter's feedback, but I was able to like really consider that. And so I feel like that's something else that we can do. Like, if we are sharing the booth or sharing space close to another person, like, maybe you take turns. Okay, this Saturday when I'm not busy, I'm going to pay close attention to you. And when you're not busy, you can pay close attention to me. We also want to make sure that you develop a 1 30-second story. So practice telling that one authentic story. And even if you tell the same story to the same customer twice, which is bound to happen, it doesn't change the passion that you're conveying about that product, right? And generally speaking, they will say, "Oh, yeah, 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 you told me that last time I was here. I remember that. You were so passionate." And then that gives you an opportunity to build on the story if you've already shared it with them. So yeah, definitely that 30-second story is that you can build on is very, very important. You want to also think, okay, what is one inclusive tool that I can incorporate, whether it's signage or visual guides or a phrase sheet. You want to make sure that you are reducing communication barriers at your booth. And then finally, you want to practice the pause reframe technique. When assumptions arise about shoppers, pause and choose curiosity instead. Give everyone the same warm, engaged service. And I can't emphasize enough that it is not does not make you a bad person if you have to be intentional about that. It is very normal for us, as human beings to just lean into things that are familiar to us. And for example, my mother has passed. So when I see people that remind me of my mother, I am automatically going to gravitate towards that. And I think anyone could understand that, right? It still doesn't change that if I do it, it can impact the way other people who have no idea that that's why I'm doing what I'm doing feel connected to their shopping experience with me at my booth. So we all have to kind of just be aware of, and again, another story to tell. I did that in a booth. I was at Forsyth Farmers Market and my literal cousin walked up. I'm from Savannah, so I wasn't expecting her. I was in the middle of a conversation with a shopper and she caught me off guard and I got very excited, went up, hugged my cousin, and I just turned to the shopper and I said, "I am so sorry. This is my cousin, so and so meet my meet the shopper." And next thing you know, we were talking about the products. I brought my cousin into the conversation with the shopper. But I did make sure that I acknowledged, that I got excited and shifted my attention and then brought it back. And it worked out. And that actually, I think, kind of deepen that engagement. And so those kind of consistent ways um, that we can shift the way that we're engaging people really do build trust and loyalty. Okay. So, In closing, I want to give you guys some things to consider in terms of next steps. I want to challenge you to the following. Choose one communication or storytelling practice that you will try at your next market. Start small and observe the results. Number two, I want you to reframe inclusion as an ongoing practice. So, not a one time achievement, not just a phrase that you say or even a sign that you put in your yard. It's really about considering the ongoing opportunity to experiment, learn, and adjust as you go. Because every small step strengthens both your relationships and your sales. All right. So inclusive communication and storytelling aren't just about being welcoming, they're essential business practices that support market success. They build stronger relationships. You're able to build deeper connections with shoppers across language and cultural differences. They also increase sales. You're able to drive revenue through trust, clarity, and customer loyalty. And all of this is truly about sustainability, financial and relational, which there's, a very large connection between the two. This creates a more welcoming and sustainable market that thrives long term. So, the key takeaways for today is that communication matters, stories build bridges, awareness drives change, and practice makes progress. And I think that is such an important thing because we will never perfect it. We will always be in a space of understanding how one conversation can be improved upon or built upon with the next. That is how relationships continue to grow and continue to expand and to flourish. And also, keep in mind that consistency really does beat grand gestures. And another thing that I think is very interesting about farmers markets, going back to the grocery store, I mean, every time something goes on sale, I feel like that's the price it was supposed to be anyway you know and I every time I go to the grocery store and I'm like, okay, so I just wait until this thing goes on sale, like, and I pay attention to the pattern. Okay, it's going to go on sale during the holidays and I'll stock up on cranberry sauce then, or whatever it is. And so we don't have those relationships with our customers. They understand because we've been storytelling, because we've shared, because we've been open and vulnerable, and we get to know the families and they get to know our families. They don't even consider price. I think what I've heard from shoppers, we've been doing shoppers surveys at these markets that we've been popping up at, and shoppers say, listen, I bring $50. When the $50 is gone, then I got to go home. Right. And so there's some degree of like just a decision on, maybe what they're going to purchase and how much they're going to spend. And then it's up to the vendors to decide who they're going to spend it with. Right. So go build stronger relationships, increase your sales, and create welcoming spaces where everyone feels like they belong. Thanks.
Thank you, Sagdrina. Are there any questions for Sagdrina while we have her here and unmuted? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone being here for the time and the patience through our technical woes. So this workshop here is the second in a series of three. We will have another workshop in a month on August 27th, also with Sagdrina. So we'll be back here kind of furthering our understanding of providing this exceptional customer service. It is a real kind of opportunity that we have at farmers markets. There's also a workshop that came before this one, and it was boosting your sales with shoppers who use SNAP benefits. That presentation was done by Mallory with Farmers Market Fund, and it is recorded. So if you're interested, I would recommend that workshop as well. The three of them go together really well as we look at people from different backgrounds, different sort of currencies that they have in the market, and how that impacts their feeling of belonging and sort of confidence in spending their dollars. So check that out, and definitely look out for some promotion of that August 27th workshop that we'll be having. And then you'll also receive a survey just to give us some idea of how this workshop felt for you and how it landed with you. And if you feel like there's other topics that you'd like to see us cover, this is a grant funded kind of project that we have going on, but it's certainly something that we want to continue to try and offer to our vendors in the ways that we can, to really help folks understand how that customer service really, it is kind of the last thing you do before your products land in someone's refrigerator. So all the work that goes into growing or producing the product, it's important not to fall short in that last moment. So thank you very much for coming, and we'll go ahead and sign off.